You're listening to the Front Yard Mission podcast. Front Yard Mission is a love God, love neighbor movement in our world. Jesus took the 613 commandments in the Old Testament and boiled them down to just two, to love God and love neighbor.
Welcome, listeners, to the Front Yard Mission podcast. This is episode 4, Jonathan.
Yes.
I'm Steve Lutz. That's Jonathan Weibel. And we are talking about Front Yard Mission. We're now looking at the third rhythm of Front Yard Mission.
Often, yes. Steve.
Invite often. And, you know, when we look in Scripture, we look in the Gospels in particular, right? There is such a culture of invitation, right? I mean, Jesus in the Gospels, he's like repeatedly inviting people, come and follow me. Right. We see Matthew inviting his friends to a party to meet Jesus. We see Andrew, who makes this pretty important invite his brother Simon, aka Peter, to come meet Jesus.
Yeah, Steve, right? Imagine Christianity without Peter.
Right.
It was kind of an important invite.
Yeah. And so when we talk about invite often, we're really talking about 4 different types of invitations. And it goes like this: an invitation into our space, into our life, into our faith community, and an invitation into the life of Christ. So let's start by talking about the first 2 here: an invitation into our space, an invitation into our life.
Well, first of all, Steve, I'd say I think a lot of our listeners, we came to Christ through an invitation. At least probably that's where it started, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's even quite possible that we came to Christ through a series of invitations. I shared my story in the first episode, but you know, I came to Christ through my neighbors inviting me over for dinner every night when I moved out to Philadelphia to play baseball and to work for a summer. And I got to know them, and they were interested in getting to know me, and I found out I kind of liked them. And they did this weird thing sometimes where they would pray for me after dinner, and, you know, I was just a 19-year-old kid, you know, and that had never happened to me before. And they eventually invited me into a relationship with Christ, but it all started with that one dinner invitation, an invitation, I would say, into their space. Yeah. So when's the last time, listener, that you've invited a neighbor into your space, whether it's a dinner or to play some cornhole or a fire pit or just to walk around your neighborhood? Yeah. Good things happen when we invite other people into our space. There's this great quote, Steve, from Henry Nouwen, and he said, "Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place."
I love that.
Oh, so good. And when we invite neighbors into our space, we are simply giving them opportunity to intersect with Jesus. Yeah.
I love that. Like, and hospitality, of course, is commanded in the New Testament. They even say, you know, hey, leaders of the church should be people who show hospitality and kind of do this regularly, make it part of their life. And, you know, I love what you're describing there. Like those invitations, it don't have to be complicated. I think sometimes we get like invite. So do I need formal invitation cards here? Yes. Do I need people to RSVP and all that? Yeah. No, a lot of times it's simple stuff, easy stuff. Just come along with me while I do this thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, like 3 nights ago, it was a nice night here in Central PA, and I'm like, just spontaneous. My wife is not very spontaneous, by the way. I am very spontaneous. And I just said, hey, I'm going to build a fire out back, and I invited my neighbor Jane, who's the 73-year-old woman who lives behind us, and I was like, Jane, see you in 10 minutes at the fire pit.
Yeah.
And then I said I texted the same thing to my other neighbors, and they all showed up. and we talked.
I love that.
We talked for 2 hours, and it was like it wasn't a big deal. Wasn't really thought out well, and then one of the boys who's 17, we're walking away from the fire pit. We're all going to our houses, and he's like, "Hey, Johnny," I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Hey, Monday, I'm going to have some friends over and we caught some fish and we want to fry the fish up. Do you think we can use your fire pit?"
Oh, man.
I'm like, "No, get out of here, kid." No, but so he's going to do that Monday night with his friends around our fire pit.
That's so cool.
I'm so glad he felt comfortable to ask me, and he calls me Johnny, which I do not allow a whole lot of people to call me.
I was going to say, that is not a normal thing. And you mentioned doing the fire. You have fire pits in both your front and backyard.
I do.
When you go to the backyard, it's strategic because there are neighbors immediately adjacent to that area.
Exactly.
Right?
And those were the neighbors that came.
Yeah. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it's simple. You probably didn't worry a whole lot about cleaning up or what you were going to wear to that little get together, right, Jonathan?
No, I did not.
And I think that's a good exhortation for some of us who, you might think, well, if I'm going to invite people into my space, I got to make sure it looks nice. And, and sometimes we have these, it's like, where does this idea come from? Where does this standard come from that everything has to be like perfect?
Right.
Before you invite people over, right? That's really more about us than about them. And honestly, if you're waiting for your house to be perfectly clean and everything to be in order and for it to look nice before you invite anybody over, you're probably never going to have them over, right? Because there might be one fleeting moment in time and then 30 seconds later, it's messy again, right?
Yeah.
So I know that could be an obstacle, but I would just say, don't let it.
Yeah.
Don't let it.
I don't know about you, Steve, but my house doesn't always look like an HGTV reveal.
Yeah. Not always. Not with a bunch of Bernese Mountain Dogs stomping around, for sure. And I will tell you, my house does not always look like an HGTV reveal either. There's no move the bus, right? So, inviting people into our space, but also into our life, right?
Right.
That's the second invitation. And, if they're going to be in and around us in our lives, guess what? They might see that you're having some day-to-day struggles. If you got kids, they might see your kids aren't in a good mood or misbehaving. They might even see, your spouse and you are not always seeing eye to eye, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's real life stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we set this unrealistic standard that we think we have to meet before we extend any kind of invitation. I would just say, I don't think we're supposed to think that way.
It actually, Steve, might make you more relatable to your neighbor if you don't have it all together all the time, right?
Right.
Like there's some sense that, and we'll talk later about having a provocative faith, but I think this is a little different.
Yeah.
Transparency is really important in our relationship, and the degree that you are transparent will be the degree that your neighbor feels free to be transparent with you.
Right.
So if you're not, they're not. If you are, they probably are. At least it gives them the freedom to be real with you.
Exactly. And I don't do Instagram or a lot of these things, but we're almost used to these days putting on filters.
Yeah.
And optimizing the angle of the selfie and like all that kind of stuff. And we're always putting on this face or this presentation to the watching world.
That's right.
And honestly, I think if you believe in grace and a God who covers over all of our failures and blemishes and flaws and especially sins, right? Like we can drop the filters.
Yeah.
we can drop the artifice.
Yeah.
And just be real. And I think people are craving that too.
Yeah. I was just, we just 2 nights ago had a neighbor over for dinner, and he's not a believer, and he we've had this discussion, and we've talked about Jesus, and he tells me he's an agnostic, and that's fine. We love him, and he's awesome. He's actually a great neighbor and participates in a lot of our Front Yard Mission stuff, and is a barista. But and so we were talking about this idea of having it all together, and I'm like, man, I don't feel like I have to have it all together around you. I'm like, not having it all together just means that I need Jesus. That's what I told him, and he's like, yeah, you don't have it all together.
So I can verify that.
That's right.
Well, he's close enough to you to see that, but also the comfort level where he can say that,
and he knows I love him.
It tells me a lot about what you've done there to build that relationship, and so it's not that kind of finger pointing of you Jesus freak hitting me over the head with a Bible kind of thing. Yeah,
I think something that speeds up this kind of invitation into our life is, and this might be really small, but like having an affinity with your neighbor, and finding out you probably have some affinity with a neighbor. You just have to figure out what that is. It might be like a TV show you watch, or it might be a sports team that you follow, or it might be you love animals like us, or
I have an affinity with one of my neighbors. We're both bad golfers.
Oh, and you live kind of on a golf course.
And we both of us back up to this golf course.
Yeah.
And so we have been talking about getting out there again.
Yeah.
And doing bad golf together. So
I am also a terrible golfer. So
so we're gonna have fun with it, and that's he texted me the other day just saying, hey, weather's getting nice, let's do it.
Yeah,
I said, all right, we'll make it happen.
And by the way, the neighbors around the fire pit, the father and son just got a membership at a local club here. And so I checked it out.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll play some golf with, because they kind of invited me into it. Yeah. It was cost prohibitive.
Well,
for my golf skill.
Yeah. You do the work there, but the point is you're finding things where you can connect with people.
Yeah. So affinities.
It builds bridges. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, when we come back from the break, let's go to a break now, but when we come back, we're going to look at some more ways to extend invitations, the next two invitations in what it means to invite often. So we'll see you after the break.
The Front Yard Mission podcast is sponsored by The Flower Box. The Flower Box is one of the top online resources for cookie decorating supplies, monthly cookie classes, and oodles of free video tutorials. Flowerbox.com features an extensive line of creative cookie cutters, cookie stencils, and cookie decorating kits. Plus, find the book, The Crafted Cookie, a beginner's guide to baking and decorating cookies. The Flower Box team is passionate about helping home bakers find joy and purpose through cookies. The Flower Box is based in Center Hall, Pennsylvania, and online at flowerbox.com. That's FLOURBOX.com. The Flower Box is honored to support Front Yard Mission.
Welcome back, everybody. We're now in part 2 of this invite often discussion. Jonathan, we've been talking about how important these invitations are, and this brings us to the third type of invitation.
Right, which is inviting them into your faith community. So
key.
Important.
And I love that. You and I have both been around long enough to remember when there was like this whole missional conversation.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Right.
And in many ways still going on, and a very helpful one, because it was saying, hey, listen, it's not just about getting people to come to us. We got to go out to them. I think in many ways what we're doing fits well into this missional conversation. But I always want to be careful to say, hey, listen, does the gospel compel us to come, have everybody come in, or to go out?
Right.
And say, yes. Right. It's both. It's both and.
Yeah.
Right. And it's depending on your background, your upbringing in the church, you might have felt an emphasis on one of those or the other. And we would say, we see both in the Gospels. We see both throughout church history. And I love how when we're inviting people into our faith community, it really is kind of both in action.
Right.
Let's go out to people. And if you're part of a good church, good faith community, there's probably good stuff happening in that church that it would make sense to invite people into.
For sure. And, I think that is kind of the first thing that people think of when we talk about invite them into your faith community, is like that Sunday where your pastor asks you, hey, we're going to invite a neighbor or a friend Sunday.
Yes. I remember that Invitation Sunday.
That's
it's
right.
Like, well, what about all the other Sundays?
That's right. Yeah, and it's a really good thing, especially if you have a good church. If you don't, why are you there? But I think it's really important to also, what you're talking about, like we invite our neighbors into the church that's outside of the building, like it might be the serve week that we do here in State College. We have a week where we need 1,000 volunteers and we serve our city.
Yeah.
And
practical ways, right? The stuff around the house, raking leaves, fixing roofs, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And we've kind of moved that a little bit to we're looking at neighborhoods now and serving our neighbors. And so we did that last year. We had about 12 or 13 of our neighbors and we got together and we served a widow. It was a lot of yard work, maybe 2 or 3 hours of yard work and painting the side of the house and all that stuff. Yep. But it was like a good thing. I think that Susie and I and maybe one other Christian and the rest of them were not believers. So
I love that.
Yeah.
A couple thoughts there. And one, I love how neighborhood based that is.
Yeah.
So you're serving the people in your neighborhood. In other words, it's not just random. I've always kind of disliked that random acts of kindness thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's do more. Let's be kind, but let's do it with purpose.
Intentional.
Right? Yeah. Intentional. And so I love that when it's connected in your neighborhood, there's opportunity to follow up, to meet other needs, to build a relationship out of that. And then you mentioned, okay, out of a dozen of you, like maybe 3 of you were believers.
Yeah. 3 or 4 of us. Yeah. And
that sounds like, what people have called with reach. There's.
Oh yeah, I love when you talk about that. Yeah. Unpack that for us.
Well. There's outreach, which is what many of us are accustomed to. But then there's the with reach idea, which is okay. Let's go out and serve, and let's bring other people along, and they get to see what we're about as Christ followers, and they get to participate as well. And it's a you can share the gospel shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be across a table or whatever face. You can share the gospel shoulder to shoulder. And a lot of that comes back to, so why are we doing what we do? I think about, for example, when we did that big food packing event.
Oh yeah.
And maybe people listening have done something similar where you get together for a weekend and there's shifts and here's pack the beans, pack the rice, pack the lentils.
400,000. I think meals.
Hundreds of thousands of meals going out. Last time we did that, we invited, actually it was family friends of my daughter from school, from middle school.
Awesome.
Well, we ended up bringing like 20 people who were not part of our church. And they were like, what a great cause, packing food for refugees. Let's do it. I mean, that's with reach.
Right.
And they were excited to be a part of it. In fact, like the following year, they organized it themselves. They're like, hey, we're doing this, right? We're doing this.
Yeah.
Which is great, right? Yeah. And it just means more connection. It means more good conversations. And you're inviting people into your faith community. They're seeing what you're about, because if we're honest, right, there's a lot of attitudes and beliefs about Christians and about the church these days that are not necessarily accurate or helpful.
Right.
And so people, you can tell them till you're blue in the face that actually we're different. We actually love people, but they want to see it.
Right. I've got a next door neighbor, and he would just tell you he's not a Christian. He's probably more agnostic, and we've had a couple gospel conversations. Mm-hmm. But this summer we have another widow in our neighborhood, and her back porch was in disrepair. And so I asked, hey, can we fix this up for you? So I asked my next door neighbor, and he said, yeah, I'm in. And he loves to serve and do those kinds of things. I told him this project's probably going to take about 3 hours. It actually took us 3 or 4 days. It was a much bigger project than I realized.
Jonathan, you're very optimistic, which I love about you.
But we had so many good conversations on that back porch, fixing it up together and doing all that. And he loved it. And like, how often do our neighbors find any purpose outside of their job? You know, I think the world, this culture is starving for purpose. So I think it gives them a little bit of purpose and gives us opportunities to discuss and talk about Jesus.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. Starving for purpose and also starving for connection, starving for community. We don't even have to cite all the things that are out there that we've read, but even as we are paradoxically more connected than ever through technology, we're actually more isolated.
Yeah.
We're actually more lonely than ever.
Agreed. I just saw a study that's so fascinating just this week. I've been bouncing it around with a couple of my friends and with my wife. And the study basically is about moms and their daughters who are at college. And what they're finding is that when moms text their daughters or vice versa, it releases this chemical that actually
the cortisol, right?
That's right. Yeah,
the stress
hormone. However, when they call their daughters on the phone, it actually releases oxytocin, that chemical that bonds us to one another.
Wow.
And we are so disconnected through social media or texting. Even just hearing someone's voice is bonding. And think about, it's probably, if it's true with moms and daughters, it's probably true across the board, right?
That sounds like a human experience thing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because for so many, like, text is default.
Right.
And we think it communicates
it's
fully.
Right? We think efficient is good.
Oh yeah. It's asynchronous, right? I'll text when I'm ready. You text when, I'll throw in a few emojis so you don't misinterpret what I'm trying to say. Are you joking or not? Right?
Yeah. Modern hieroglyphics.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. That's how we're progressing as a society. Right. And that's another thing, just while you're bringing up some studies, the thing I read years ago was that the majority of emails, the tone is misinterpreted.
Oh, yeah.
The majority of it.
Yeah.
So most of the time, you're being misunderstood.
Right.
If it's written, which is really sobering, which is all that to say is, like, the technology at best is a facsimile of actually connecting. And people, whether they realize it or not, are starving for it. I mean, there is an epidemic of loneliness going on.
Yeah.
When we invite people, we should be inviting people into our faith community, because listen, churches take a lot of hits. They take a lot of knocks. We actually do pretty well. We actually do community pretty well.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yep.
Years ago, and I might have mentioned this in one of these spaces where we're talking about FYM, but years ago when I was working with college students, primarily atheist and agnostic students, this is probably, 15 years ago now. And I was leading a discussion group, and I always love to say on campus, I was leading a discussion group, and I love to say this is the only Christian group on campus that's majority non-Christians. And we'd debate, we'd talk about all these different issues. Some of it was really highfalutin, over my head, really sharp kids, really smart kids. And we'd even argue, right?
Right.
And there were a couple times where, like, for whatever reason, my life, I was getting busier. There was more going on. I was like, guys, I don't know if I can keep doing this every week. Can we go back to every other week or scale it back? And they were like, no, don't. This is so important. We value this. And you know what? We'd have these, like, wide ranging discussions about theology and philosophy. And sometimes people would be at each other's throats. I mean, it was intense, right?
Yeah.
But then we'd go out to eat afterwards and just hang out and get a plate of fries or nachos or something.
Yeah.
Those were the best conversations. And I realized, why do they want to hang out with me, a pastor in his 30s talking with these college kids? It's because they need community.
Yeah.
They want connection.
That makes me think of the Alpha Course.
Yeah.
We've done one in our neighborhood, and that's a kind of invite them into your faith community. And
it is.
we have dinner together.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I would say the dinner part is the more important part than even watching the videos. And because that's where you build relationship and you get to hear stories and you laugh. And it's, the gospel is a big part of the gospel is relationship and loving one another. And I think most of us came to Christ because someone radically loved us, and took an interest in us, in our story. So
I love that. And that, Alpha, I mean, what an incredible impact globally in terms of helping people. I would say it provides like the context for them to hear the gospel.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Community itself is not the gospel, but man, is it a powerful context or apologetic for the gospel. And here's another thing I probably say elsewhere, but you ever go to like the jewelry store?
Never.
It's been a while for me too. We are blessed in that neither of our wives are like, you got to buy me expensive jewelry. But I do remember going and, for example, like an engagement ring. And when they want to show you these diamonds, right? I mean, they have it all figured out.
Yeah.
They don't just like come into this dimly lit room and here's like a beat up table and like pour them out. I mean, that's pretty sketchy if they do. A good jeweler will say, okay, here's like the black velvet.
Yes.
And let's turn that jewel. And we have like this perfect spotlight streaming down on it so you can see it. Like they know how to present this jewel so that you really can see it in many ways for the first time. Like is that what it does? Right. And I think the gospel is the same way. The gospel is the jewel.
Right.
But the community is that context.
Yep.
That like sets it off. Like that just helps people see it for the first time.
Yeah. I know you're a big TR fan. Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. Right. That's right.
And I think like one of his best quotes, and I'll butcher it, is people, what is it? People, you know it. You people
don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yes.
Is that a Teddy Roosevelt quote?
It is a TR quote.
We might need to fact check that.
Google that right
now. It is a great, regardless of who said it, it's
good.
Incredibly true. Still over 100 years since he probably said it.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. They don't, and especially in this day and age, like talk is cheap. Information is cheap. There's 1,000 voices screaming at us every day from all corners.
Yeah.
But there's a lot less people out there who actually care for us.
Absolutely.
And so, we're going to listen to that.
Yeah. And then, so we've got, invite them into our faith community. And the last invitation is invite them into the life of Christ.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk more in the next podcast on that.
Yeah. I think that's such a rich topic. I think it deserves its own episode because there's a lot of thoughts, fears, trepidations, confusion even around that topic of how to invite people into knowing Christ. So let's do that in the next episode.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Go to Amazon.com and pick up your copy of our book, Front Yard Mission: How to Start a Love God, Love Neighbor movement in your neighborhood. If you're interested in learning more about Front Yard Mission, find us at frontyardmission.com or join our Facebook or Instagram community where you can find tips, stories, and encouragement to help you with your front yard mission. The Front Yard Mission podcast is sponsored by The Flower Box, produced by Nick Baumhart, and hosted by Steve Lutz and Jonathan Weibel. Our theme music, How to Heal a City, was written by Jonathan Weibel. I'm Trisha Brock. See you next time.